Welcome everyone. My name is Seijin Kim. I'm the program manager at the Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development, Forum Asia. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 9th Asian Regional Human Rights Defenders Forum today. Forum Asia is a regional human rights organization with 80 members across 21 Asian countries. Founded in 1991, we work to strengthen movements for human rights and sustainable development through research, advocacy, capacity development, and solidarity action in Asia and beyond. Its secretariat is based in Bangkok and has sub-regional offices in Geneva, Jakarta, and Kathmandu. This year marks the 20 years since the first Asia Regional Human Rights Defenders Forum was held in Bangkok 2001, and that was only the beginning. From there, we have organized 8 editions of this forum in different sub-regions of Asia, and we have brought many defenders together and built a stronger network of defenders in Asia. From this space, new ideas and solidarity action took shape. One of the key examples is the Forum Asia's emergency assistance for defenders at risk, one of the concrete outcomes from the third Asia Regional Human Rights Defenders Forum back in 2009. Also, the 5th Asia Regional Human Rights Defenders Forum brought the much needed attention to defenders working on economic, social, and cultural rights in Asia. Unfortunately, today, we are facing a global health crisis unlike any in the past, one that is spreading human suffering and upending people's lives. We are unable to meet in person for this, and the first time we are holding the forum online. Today, we still bring about 300 human rights defenders and allies from Asia and beyond online space. We hope the forum will be able to contribute to improving protection of defenders by providing safe space, although it's not physical, for all of us to connect with our allies. Throughout our exchanges and discussion, we can learn from each other and be able to navigate new challenging environment we are operating. In order to do so, we carefully listen to what defenders would like to learn, discuss, and exchange with other fellow activists from Asia, and all sessions are tailored to the needs and interests of defenders in Asia. Some of the key topics are issues surrounding the protection of defenders, best practice to counter harassment, security, well-being of defenders, new initiative and creative approach to human rights, and positive developments and lessons learned from them. There will be total 35 parallel sessions next 4 days, including today's opening high-level panel discussion with the distinguished guests. We are delighted to have them with us today and hope the discussion will inspire everyone joining us today. Despite its online format, we hope the forum will be interactive and participatory, and you would be able to engage with the participants and session as much as possible. And we would like to have your full cooperation to respect each other in this virtual event. Now we are opening the high-level panel discussion by listening the song performed by Mai Khoi, artist and activist from Vietnam. She's also Artist Protection Fund Fellow. She is an award-winning pop singer in Vietnam, but due to her outspoken criticism to censorship and restriction on her freedom of speech, she has been harassed by the government. Today, she's going to perform a song she wrote based on her experience. The title of the song is a question. Please join me in welcoming Mai Khoi. Mai Khoi, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I am so pleased to perform for Forum Asia this year. The song that I will perform now is called Questions. I wrote the song after I was detained the second time at the airport, the Nội Bài airport. That time, so many people from the outside had put pressure and asked the police to release me. And I was released after 8 hours detained. I think it was a success of the solidarity. And of course, we want more bigger and bigger success with the greater solidarity. Anyway, I wrote this song when I came back home, and I think about the detention. I use the questions that the police used to interrogate me to make the lyrics for my song. And I think these songs will tell people about my experience of this situation, and when people, if people were in the same situation, they will know what to do. So yeah, the song's called Questions. I hope all of you will like this song.
Một bọn ở cục trong khủng bố đã bắt tôi ngay giữa lòng phố. Cha hỏi tôi những câu hỏi thật ngố. Thằng con người ngộm lố nhố, đập bàn ra oai đến là khổ. Mang tiếng là đội trong khủng bố mà toàn hỏi những câu hỏi thật vô bổ. Sao lâu rồi không thấy cô xuất hiện trên tivi đồ, cũng không thấy cô xuất hiện trên báo chí như ngày xưa đồ. Cô viết bài hát này để làm chi? Những lời thơ này với động cơ gì? Những con số này chắc chắn là có ý đồ, chắc chắn là có ý đồ, chắc chắn là có ý đồ. Tại sao xin ông cho chúng tôi được đưa tiền cho ông để ông cho chúng tôi được làm việc đồ? Tại sao những kẻ nghĩ ra trại phục hồi nhân phẩm mới cần vào trong đó ngồi đồ? Tại sao sau những đợt thanh trừng phạt còn lại một lũ ăn hại đồ? Quan hệ tình dục với những ai? Có phải cô biết người tên Mai dính líu thế nào với Ngọc Đại? Sao bảo cô không muốn có tai? Thấy thằng chồng cô cũng đẹp trai, sao không làm đại đứa con lai? Những câu nói đó cứ lặp đi lặp lại, 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 lặp đi lặp lại.
Thank you, Mai Khoi, for your great performance, and especially it was written by you and based on your experience over those 8 hours detention. I think many of us actually can also resonate how you have felt about this experience and etc. And I think it was beautiful and powerful in that sense. So now moving right along, it is now my pleasure to introduce Shamini Darshni Kaliemuthu, our Executive Director of Forum Asia. After her welcome remarks, she will be moderating the high-level panel discussion. Shamini, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sejin and Mai Khoi. That was absolutely mesmerizing. Thank you so much for sharing your art with us. Good day to you, participants of the 9th Asian Human Rights Defenders Forum. The AHRDF 9 is Forum Asia's response to the ongoing challenges that human rights defenders in Asia continue to face. For the first time, we are holding this forum online due to the pandemic for reasons that Sejin had already shared with us earlier. Although we would have loved to have all of us in a room together, we recognized and responded to the need to have this forum at this crucial point in time. We thank you for joining a crucial conversation today and hope that you are staying as safe as possible on all counts. Allow me to spend a few minutes recalling the recommendations that we made at the last AHRDF 8 held in Bali, Indonesia in 2018. Forum Asia has noted some progress in key areas which we would like to share with you. Notable is the recommendation to the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders in 2018, calling for a review of the existing system to enable appeals and press releases about HRDs to be disseminated efficiently and in a timely manner. We are pleased that the Special Rapporteur is now looking into this and has involved Forum Asia in consultations on how to improve this communication system so that it effectively works for defenders' protection measures as well. We are further pleased to note that recommendations from AHRDF 8 to national human rights institutions for specific mechanisms to be put in place for the protection of human rights defenders at risk has also received attention. Forum Asia had recommended several measures, including the establishment of early warning systems for NHRIs to have a focal point or a desk on human rights defenders, as well as for the creation of temporary relocation mechanisms. The adoption of the Marrakesh Declaration, for example, and the Asia-Pacific Forum and NHRI's Regional Action Plan on the Protection of HRDs, after years of lobbying from CSOs, including Forum Asia, has borne fruit. Further, Forum Asia's 2018 recommendations to donors to ensure flexibility on requirements for CSOs and HRDs and to pursue a more creative approach to support them and their demands have resulted in donor dialogues and continued advocacy for flexible and core support for CSOs and HRDs. In 2018, we had also recommended that CSOs and HRDs continue monitoring, documenting, and submitting reports on human rights violations. This has directly resulted in the expanding of monitoring and documentation at the national level, and Forum Asia has plans for further expansion in collaboration with our members across Asia. Also, our calls that the pertinent work of human rights defenders is amplified at the community level, along with information about human rights, have translated into visuals and reader-friendly reference materials for HRD security, which have also been translated into local languages. Distinguished guests, we are facing increasing challenges over the past year due to the pandemic. Yet defenders and people's movements remain resilient all over Asia. The important work of human rights defenders to ensure the realization of human rights is often answered with harassment and violence by power holders. A clear example can be seen in the gross human rights violations in Myanmar by the military and the continuous killings in Afghanistan and the Philippines. Forum Asia's report, Defending in Numbers, a message of strength from the ground, tells us that there are regional patterns of violations against human rights defenders in Asia. In 2019 and 2020, the period which the report covers, we have witnessed how HRDs across Asia have been enduring hostilities both online and offline. They have seen their loved ones and communities increasingly subjected to threats and harassment. Forum Asia recorded 1,073 cases of violations committed against human rights defenders in 21 countries in Asia, which in all likelihood probably only covers a part of actual violations that are happening on the ground. The violations we recorded included, but are not limited to, physical violence, intimidation and threats, online attacks, vilification, judicial harassment, arbitrary arrests and detentions, and forced disappearances and killings. At least 3,046 human rights defenders, their family members, NGOs, and communities were affected as a result. Such a situation shows that solidarity and support to defenders and civil society is needed more than ever. There was also some good news. The emergence of solidarity movements among human rights defenders through cross-regional alliances to challenge repression and authoritarianism was a positive development. We saw how young defenders, through the Milk Tea Alliance, for example, are driving the narrative of a people's movement across Asia. Similarly, several good practices by national human rights institutions supporting defenders also came to light, where some had started to pay more attention on the protection of human rights defenders. What we need in order to ensure that human rights defenders continue to be able to carry out their work safely is primarily for states to respect the legitimate work carried out by HRDs. States must respect obligations under international human rights treaties and standards, particularly the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. States must also cease the targeting of human rights defenders through brutalization and other terrible acts. Similarly, non-state actors, in particular businesses, should not be complicit in committing violations against defenders for profit's sake. To unpack all of this and more, we are joined today by the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, Lawlor, whom we are privileged to have as our keynote speaker. The keynote speech will be followed by a panel discussion from human rights defenders from around the region. Maria Ressa from the Philippines, Aung from Myanmar, and Aruna Roy from India will take us through some of the domestic and regional perspectives they have to offer. A brief introduction of our keynote speaker before I hand the floor over to her. Mary has worked with human rights defenders for over 20 years, although her foray into human rights began 2 decades prior. In the 80s, she was a board member of Amnesty International Ireland, where she served as chair for 6 years and later became its director. She founded Frontline Defenders in 2001 and was its executive director from 2001 to 2016, playing a key role in the development of Frontline Defenders into the prominent international organization it is today. Mary took up the mantle of UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders on the 1st of May 2020, and is also currently an adjunct professor of business and human rights in the Center for Social Innovation at the Trinity College, Dublin. It is now my deep privilege to invite the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, Lawlor, to deliver the keynote speech. The floor is yours, Mary.
Thank you very, very much for having me here today. And I'd like to start by saying that was the most exquisite song, Mai, and I really thought it was such a wonderful opening. Of course, it's always terrible to hear the statistics, the cold statistics about the injustice and the abuse of human rights defenders who, after all, are just doing their peaceful, legitimate work in accordance with the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, to which all states have agreed. And yet, as you documented, over 1,073 violations against human rights defenders have taken place in 21 countries. I mean, it is really shocking. I mean, I was shocked when I did the killings report to learn that killings had taken place in 64 countries of the UN member states. This is another very shocking statistic to me, that these attacks online and offline, the arbitrary arrest, the detention, the smear campaigns, the stigmatization, the intimidation, the disappearance and the killings just keep on continuing. And we just don't seem to be able to persuade states that this is wrong. As you said, I was given the mandate a year ago now, and my mandate is to promote the work of human rights defenders. And since I started last year, I've taken a people-centered approach to it. I focused on individual human rights defenders at immediate risk in Asia and all over the world. And I have had many, many meetings with human rights defenders all over the world, hundreds and hundreds of them, including with human rights defenders in Asia. And it is a global mandate. And I try and work closely with other special procedures and take joint action where it is possible or useful, but I stick strictly to the mandate, and I only take action where there is a specific human rights defender focus to it, because I am trying to get it through to states, you know, who a human rights defender is, what a human rights defender does, how they are motivated by human rights. They are not terrorists. They are not political activists. And in order to do that, I am trying to really focus on a people-centered approach, giving the information about individual cases to states that I want answers on. There are a few tools that I use to support human rights defenders, and the first is the communications, as you said earlier on, the communication system. You had a recommendation for the system and the press releases. So let me tell you about this. This is where I raise allegations of the rights of human rights defenders with state authorities and other actors like business in formal letters. They're called communication. I can only do that once I have solid, specific information about the human rights defenders concerned. And also I need the consent, and the consent takes a long time sometimes. So it's really important when you send a complaint to the defender's inbox that you also give the consent of the defender's family or lawyer. And once I get this information, obviously I do the letters and I detail the allegations and remind the authorities of their obligations. Now, as you said, they have 60 days to respond, 60 days. And then only after that can you make it public. Now, you can make it public if you say in the communication that you're going to issue a press release. You can make it public 2 days after that. But the problem is the media office in the UN has 55 mandate holders and the High Commission and all that. So you're not allowed to do press releases on everything. About 15% of the communications I do, I can include a press release. At the moment, I am including press releases on all the long-term cases of detention of human rights defenders for the report, but I'll get to that in a minute. So it's a very slow process, and states will also either not reply or respond, or just don't engage. If they do reply, they don't engage. It's more like an acknowledgement. They don't engage with the information raised. And of course, I receive much more information about human rights defenders than I can take up, because the mandate is very busy and the resources are very few. But I am trying as hard as possible to do as many communications as possible, and also to include, to ask if it is urgent, I try and set a deadline for other rapporteurs to join. Because as we all know, with human rights defenders, it's a different kind of a mandate than a thematic mandate such as torture or extrajudicial executions. And you need to be fast if somebody is in danger. So sometimes I just go it alone if it isn't possible to get others to join up, or I am now developing social media in a better way, hopefully. We've just launched a website, and that's where I'm hoping that the information I receive that I can't take up in a communication, or the information that I receive that needs immediate recognition and response to, it goes on the website. We put a tweet out and then it's linked to whatever I'm hearing on the website. I also put up all the formal communications there too, and other information that I think human rights defenders might like to have, but I'm very open to advice on this because it is very new. So of course, you know, my focus, as you know, are human rights defenders, and it's no secret. You know, I have always wanted, since I set up Frontline Defenders, to try and improve the situation a bit for human rights defenders. And for me now, the best way that I can do that, having left the NGO world behind, and I am independent of states, I'm independent of the UN system, and I'm independent of NGOs. And of course, there are things that NGOs can do that I can't do anymore. Like, you know, I don't have a grants program like, you know, we did in Frontline. I don't have training, any of those kind of practical tools that will assist human rights defenders. But where I think the value is, the added value that I can bring now is that I can talk to states and be a bridge for human rights defenders between them and states. And I will always try to engage with representatives of states. And in some circumstances, it can be really difficult. I mean, I'm trying to get through all the permanent missions, and I started with, you know, the ones who were doing the killings, and then now I'm on to long-term imprisonment, and the members of the Human Rights Council. So that's the way I'm approaching them. And I just, it's slow work, and they have to realize that you don't have two heads and that you're reasonably trustworthy. And but they do talk to you. I mean, that the interesting thing for me is that in the old days, of course, the friendly states would always talk to you, but the really hostile ones would never talk to you. Whereas now I am getting meetings with the hostile states. So I try to encourage states to protect defenders, and I raise individual cases, but we all know that your best protection comes from yourselves, your solidarity with each other, the networks that you build between yourselves. And and you know, it's always the friends, the neighbors, the NGOs, the communities that offer the best protection. I always remember Hina Jilani saying that to me when she became Special Rapporteur, Special Representative as it was then, that her protection came from her networks. And as you know, in my report on killings, I instanced the terrible situation in the Philippines and elsewhere in the region. And my next report is on human rights defenders who have been given sentences of over 10 years in prison. I had to make a judgment about what would I take as a long-term sentence. And I took 10 years. And I did a trawl of all the communications that from 2000. And it is heartrending to see the defenders still in prison in countries like China, some up to 23 years, 35 in total for one defender. Vietnam, who has, as Mai will know, and all of you, the most awful record of long-term detention. And so I'm hoping that through this report, I'll be able to, I suppose, bring to the fore some people who have been forgotten about, because I do think that it's very easy for us to forget about people. We try hard in the beginning and on anniversaries or maybe birthdays, or if a trial is coming up, but it's so hard to keep up sustained attention, and I want to do that. And every 6 months we are going to be revisiting all the cases that I have taken up since I started. So I'm very open to any tools you think that I should be developing, and I'm still working out how I can most effectively support, but I look forward very much to the discussions now and to learning from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary. That was really enlightening, and I'm sure I speak for us all when I say that we look forward to the reports that you will be producing, and especially what you said about, during emblematic days we talk about cases, and then sometimes they slip away, and then we have to keep remembering, and that's really important. And thank you for doing the work that you do. I'd like to turn the attention now to our panel discussion. We are joined by 3 speakers today, 3 panelists. Maria Ressa, the co-founder and CEO of Rappler in the Philippines. We also have Aruna Roy, who is a social and political activist in India, and Aung, the Union Minister for Human Rights in Myanmar's National Unity Government. Our first speaker is Maria Ressa. Maria has been a journalist in Asia for 25 years. She co-founded Rappler, the top digital news site, leading the fight for press freedom in the Philippines. As Rappler's CEO and president, Maria has herself endured constant political harassment and arrests by the Duterte government, forced to post bail 10 times to stay free. For her courage and work on disinformation and fake news, Maria was named Time Magazine's 2018 Person of the Year. Before founding Rappler, Maria focused on investigating terrorism in Southeast Asia. She opened and ran CNN's Manila bureau for nearly a decade before opening the network's Jakarta bureau, which she ran from 1995 to 2005. Maria, a question to you. As the co-founder and CEO of Rappler in the Philippines, you yourself, as I mentioned, as part of your bio, you've been in the line of fire for upholding the freedom of expression and the right to information. We know that journalists are one of the most targeted groups of defenders, as captured in Forum Asia's Defending in Numbers report. In your opinion, what is the root cause of violations, especially in the wake of COVID-19? And further, as independent media and journalists are key for the protection of civic space, how can the media and defenders at large collaborate to counter negative narratives along with vilification? Over to you, Maria. Floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me today. And Mary, it was really great to listen to what you were doing. And I think, the biggest question now is, where do you get the energy to keep going? Because it just doesn't, it seems to have gotten worse. And certainly that's the case here in the Philippines. Shamini, on your question, the quick answer is the technology that has shifted the world today and turned lies into facts and facts into lies. Literally, if I tell you that this is a glass of milk, if somebody tells you 1,000,000 times this is a glass of water, you would actually begin to doubt whether this is milk or water. So I think that's the first step. And I'm going to use a great quote, and it's from an American biologist. His name is E.O. Wilson, who defines the problem, which I think is the root cause. He said that what we are facing today are Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. The quick correction is I'm actually a decade older than that. So this is now my 35th year as a journalist, crazily enough. And I can't believe that I spent the first part of my youth really covering the growth of democracy in Southeast Asia as kind of authoritarian one-man rule country shifted to democracy, starting with the Philippines in '86. And then now at the tail end of my career, I'm watching that pendulum swing back towards dictatorship. So let me answer this one. You know, I received, in less than 2 years, the Philippine government filed 10 arrest warrants against me. In 2017, the government propagandists tried to trend the hashtag arrest Maria Ressa. They failed then, but they kept at it. And then 2 years later, I was arrested twice in a little more than a month. They violated my rights when they prevented me from posting bail, and then they detained me overnight. But again, I am lucky compared to most, right? I think what we've learned in the Philippines, what we've lived through, has given us firsthand experience of how the law and law enforcement, the very processes of democracy supposed to protect us, have now been turned against us. And, you know, a big chunk of this really began in 2016, 4 months after Duterte became president. Rappler and I wrote these investigative pieces, a series of 3, showing you how the first casualty in our nation's battle for truth is the number of people killed in our brutal drug war. That violence was facilitated and fueled by American social media companies. So based on big data analysis, we at Rappler reported the networks that were manipulating us, insidiously manipulating us online, targeting and attacking truth tellers, pounding to silence anyone challenging power, which created an extensive social media, we called it a propaganda machine. 5 years ago, we demanded an end to impunity on these 2 fronts, Duterte's drug war and Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook. Today, it's only gotten worse. And of course, Silicon Valley sins came home to roost on January 6th with mob violence on Capitol Hill. As of this year, Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Research Project said that these cheap armies on social media are rolling back democracy in more than 80 countries around the world. What happens on social media does not stay on social media. Online violence leads to real world violence. And I guess let me just zoom in on this, because while the battle for our rights continue, that biggest part, if you can't tell fact from fiction, is critical, right? That's why I feel we're at this existential moment. Social media, with its very highly profitable micro-targeting tools, has become a behavior modification system. It's literally insidiously manipulating us, and we are Pavlov's dogs, experimented on in real time, and the consequences have been disastrous. Facebook is the world's largest distributor of news, and yet the studies have shown that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than really boring facts. I spent my career learning how to make those boring facts interesting for you, right? The social media platforms that deliver the facts to you are biased against facts. They are biased against journalists. They are by design dividing us and radicalizing us. So think of it like this. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without trust, we have no shared reality, and it becomes impossible to deal with our world's existential problems: climate, coronavirus, the battle for truth. That's the foundation, I think, of part of the reason that human rights defenders are far more vulnerable today than before. Journalists lost our gatekeeping powers to technology companies. Tech abdicated responsibility for the public sphere, and women, people of color, the LGBTQ, those who are already marginalized, have become even more vulnerable. This was pointed out in the UNESCO report that was just released last May. The chilling, Carol Cadwallader from London and I are the big data case studies, right? There's this cost to speaking truth to power. It's become higher for the people at the front lines. And, you know, human rights defenders, journalists are not terrorists. And yet in the Philippines, for more than a year now, journalists, including myself, have been branded, have been red tagged. It's the Filipino phrase. It's kind of like our version of McCarthyism. And part of that goes hand in hand with a new law that came out just around the same time that Hong Kong came out with its security law. It's an anti-terror law. There are 37 petitions against this at the Supreme Court now, demanding that this be declared unconstitutional. Under this law, anyone declared a terrorist by a small group of cabinet secretaries can be arrested without a warrant and held for up to 24 days. So the dangers increase. If you don't know what the facts are, it is impossible to come together in a shared reality to actually act together. It sounds horrendous, but I haven't lost hope, right? And listening to Mary gives me more hope.
Thank you, Maria, for that. I particularly liked what you said, without fact, you don't have truth. Without truth, you don't have trust. So I have a follow-up question for you, and if you could briefly share this. How do you think, if big tech has taken over the role of journalists as gatekeepers, how do you think, and do you think journalists can take it back?
No. Not today. And you know, the funny thing is everyone expects us to have the answers, but news organizations are no longer the gatekeepers. And even if, you know, look, I mean, there's a lot of problems. Journalists are far from perfect. We know that, right? But this kind of exponential lies on social media is literally changing the way we think. So what needs to happen is regulations. And 2 years ago, you asked me this, I would have said no, but now it's very clear that leaving the social media platforms alone has led to a far more dystopian present, leading to we're seeing a fascist present and future in many of our countries, right? I cannot believe what I've lived through in the Philippines. So regulations. So I look at the EU for the Democratic Action Plan. They have 2 draft legislation, the Digital Services Act, the ones for the market. The UK has its online harms bill, and the US has Section 230, has a look at that, but it's actually the states' attorney generals that are doing a little bit better work. I think we need to understand that our emotions are being used against us. It is being harnessed by populist leaders who are manipulating anger and hate, and it feeds that entire cycle.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was fascinating and troubling at the same time. I'm gonna invite our next panelist to share her perspectives. Aruna Roy. Aruna is a socio-political activist and founder member of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, the National Campaign to People's Right to Information, and the School for Democracy. She has worked for access to constitutional rights, for the poor, including the right to information, employment, and food security. She was a member of the National Advisory Council, NAC, from 2004 to 2006, again from 2010 to 2013, and once more in 2014. She has won several awards and was listed as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2011. Aruna, my question to you. As a social movement leader who's been advocating for human rights for decades, could you share with us your observations of the current situation of civic space and human rights defenders, both in the context of India as well as Asia? Also, we know that leaders of social movements are often targeted for doing their peaceful work, especially when they come from marginalized communities. What efforts should we be taking to counter this? And it would be great if you could highlight what has been working and how we can push that, what has been working together even further forward. Thank you very much. Over to you, Aruna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mai, for this revolutionary song, which is kind of reached out to me as a fellow activist. We have a slogan in India, which we say, "Ladenge, jeetenge," we'll struggle and we'll win. So I think we will all struggle and win, and no matter what comes ahead, we face it. Thanks to Barry, and Maria has actually said what I could have said very easily. I mean, we all of us have shared so many similar experiences, and it was wonderful to hear you and to know that there are many more sisters of mine who've shared and lived through lives which are very similar. I, of course, come from the Right to Information campaign, and the Right to Information campaign has fought for citizens' right to access information, which is a fundamental wheel of governance. And it's been the most resisted act, actually. It was welcomed in the beginning because people didn't realize how much it would ask for. We have lost 100 information seekers, been killed, because they've asked for questions which were sensitive to people who were either corrupt or who had misused power in governance or elsewhere. So, and the second law with which I've been deeply involved is for really an anti-poverty law, but it's an employment law called the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which guarantees people in rural areas work. And millions of people tens of millions of people have got work since 2005. In the Right to Information Act, every year 6 to 8 million users in India, despite the killings. So two powerful social motivational acts, which were born out of our common struggle many years ago. But let's look at contemporary India and contemporary Asia. What has happened? Human rights and movements operate within a framework of democratic rights and guarantees. You take away that guarantee and human rights, we are all criminals. I mean, there's no way we can even express a dissent or a difference with the state. So what has happened consistently and incrementally in Asia and in the global context, and particularly in India, is the deceitful way in which democracy as electoral politics continues to appear robust. There was a time when electoral politics was ineffective. We knew it was failing. But today it has become an illusion which perpetuates itself through the social media that Maria talked. So the social media fuels this illusion, and this illusion gets stronger and stronger. So the emergent pattern for the struggle for human rights is to fight this elected autocracy towards greater centralization, which is really defeating democracy, defeating us in very, very, very strong ways in India, because decentralization of state governments, of decentralization of units has all gone. The centralization of power everywhere is working against rights, human rights, and all kinds of economic and social rights. The fallout is the attack on equality, the right to association, that is fraternity, and the liberty to express opinions. I never thought when I was young that I would need to reiterate these three basic tenets that we've been talking about since the French Revolution. But today it shocks me that we have to reiterate those values once and once again. So in my life of 50 years of activism, I didn't have to say this before till the last 10 years. In these last 10 years, we've had to say it over and over again. It's become now, instead of attacking individuals, it's become a systemic attack. It's groups. It's a group which amplifies voices. It is the social activists, it's the activists, it's the human rights defender. So there's a whole range of people who amplify the voice. So anyone who amplifies the voice is attacked, but now they've gone beyond that, I think in India and otherwise, where groups of people, because of identity, because of religion, because of caste in India, and maybe in South Asia, because of other reasons, have become identified. And if you belong to that community, you're a target, no matter what you say. So it has nullified, and it's actually paralyzed, whether you're an academic or a public intellectual, or whether you're groups of people, from speaking truth to power. So you cannot speak truth to power, and you're shifted from that position as soon as you start making a point. So what has happened is that shifting from individual leaders, now there's been a reduction of civil space, civic space itself. Today, we don't have the space. The pandemic has restricted us in our homes because we can't go out. I'm sitting in my home, and for the first time in my public life, I have not left home for more than 5 months, and I'm restricted in my house because of the second wave of corona in my country, and I'm sitting here. But those of us who have acted in the public sphere are restricted, and we cannot go out and mobilize anymore in this country. And we have two sets of actions taken against us. One is the action of the health interests of a nation, which says you should not spread the disease. But more violent than that is the interest of the state, which wants you to stay put and not mobilize at all. India, as elsewhere, like in Asia, like Tibet and Myanmar and Hong Kong, the government of India, which is the central government, has been using draconian laws, and many laws have been passed, which put areas and entire regions under scrutiny and control. So the whole of Kashmir, the whole of the tribal belt, the whole of, it's not no longer some part of it or an individual, it's whole areas which are put under control. So the corona lockdown has served as a significant fig leaf to cover these anti-democratic activities. So disaster management has been misused to ignore and suppress popular movements. The centralization of governance coupled with crony capitalism tends not only to underscore the autocracy of those governments tending towards fascism, but perverts the rule of law by the passage of anti-people laws. We used to fight for the rule of law, but today if you fight for the rule of law, you are fighting against yourself, because those laws which have been passed in India, which I'll come to in a little while, are against us. So we can't agitate against the rule of law. So it leaves you with a very peculiar space where you're fighting for a removal of laws, not for a rule of law. In such a political atmosphere, the freedom of expression lies at the core of attaining all freedoms. That's what we feel in India today. That is the nerve center. It is the use of this freedom which the ruling regimes attack and term as anti-national, seditious, and they use it as a security threat and terrorism to incarcerate hundreds of people. Thousands of people have been incarcerated in India. Thus, avenues and spaces for protest shrink, both physical and virtual, because they're now an attempt even to shrink our virtual space, like this one, to talk to each other. Many governments are using global pandemic and its genuine concerns, especially isolation and restrictions of travel, as an excuse to perpetuate arbitrary and fascist tendencies in decision-making and control. The pandemic is being opportunistically used by the power elite, both electorally and otherwise, to use fear to repress freedom of expression and assembly. Fear is one of the most palpable things that Maria expressed, and as happened in the case of Mai, you use fear and you have a silent population. So they've been using fear through the social media, through propaganda, through rules, through laws that have been enacted. You must have all heard of the farmers' protest. The farmers' protest has been on for over a year in this country, and it's been one of the most important protests that have gone on. In the farmers, it's a non-violent protest. It's gone on for 12 months, 6 months surrounding the capital city of New Delhi. We have never seen such a large mobilization in our lives in this country, where thousands and hundreds of thousands is just casual. But we have seen more than that of farmers protesting non-violently for the right to decide, for the right to have their way in decision-making and democracy. It makes a mockery of human rights and democracy. Many people have been attacked by the police and have also died. The right to know and the right to live are all streams of information flow, and they have all been congealed, or they're sought to be congealed. Because if you don't have information, you don't even know what you're fighting against. You don't have a right. So the digital world has also encroached on us in a very dramatic way. I won't go into it, but I'll just mention and echo what Maria said. The digital world has taken control of our lives through statistics. So through statistics, you also control our lives. Through the digital media, you also control all our lives. Last year, when COVID happened, Shamini, you asked me about what happened when COVID happened. The government of India imposed the restrictions on travel, and hundreds of thousands of people had 4 hours to go home or be out of work and on the street. Nothing like that has ever been witnessed in this country. And India had the world's strictest lockdown last year. And it was an unplanned lockdown with no security net for the poor. We witnessed the largest migration ever post-partition with Pakistan, which was 1947 between India and Pakistan. That happened then. We saw the largest migration. The country was unprepared. The government was unprepared. There was no food. There was no ration. There was no housing. There was no transport. It was one of the most horrible situations that could have been done. And for me, I extend my definition of human rights to the condition those people were in It was the most abject condition of the poorest and the most backward in the country. The health crisis has been treated like a law and order issue. Instead of treating health as an issue that had to be addressed through provisions of oxygen, provisions of oximeters, provision of all those things, it has been treated like a law and order situation. The second time round, they have been a little wiser, but they have failed to provide it. There are overcrowded jails with large percentage of unconvicted under trials, not capable of following any COVID appropriate behavior. Because in these overcrowded jails, where can you have any isolation? A national fund called PM Cares was created by the Prime Minister, but it's actually a trust in which crores of rupees, millions and billions of rupees have gone. The PM does not allow scrutiny by anybody, not even by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. And where this money goes, nobody knows. And so the right to information law has been set aside for this particular trust, and we really cannot even find out what happens. Large numbers of people have assembled. In India, where we have a lot of religion and religious festivals, as you know, there's something called the Kumbh Mela, in which everyone who had any sense said, please do not have the Kumbh Mela this year, because millions of people will go there and spread COVID-19. They did not listen, and millions and billions turned up there. They were all unmasked. And the second wave, which we have witnessed, has been terrible. I mean, there has been no greater amount of loss of life. I had COVID. I'm a post-COVID person myself. I had COVID and I had to be in hospital for a while. And all of us who are protected, privileged people have also got it. It's been a huge attack on health. And instead of spending any time on health, we've been looking at why we can target minorities. Last year, the Tablighi Jamaat, a Muslim congregation, had gathered together in hundreds and was vilified. And so they were told that you cannot do it. And while the Kumbh Mela, because it's a Hindu coming together, was allowed. So if you question that, then you're seditious, you are a violator of human rights. I mean, you're a violator of state laws, you're a violator of everything, and you can be. So what we have had is the center has not provided adequate medical measures. The center has not provided oxygen, medicines, vaccination. We are suffering from shortage of vaccination in so many places. And though no major significant economic relief measure has been announced, the rich have become richer and the poor poorer. The Oxfam report, which lists the wealth of Indian billionaires, says it has increased by 35% during the lockdown. 35%. And the increase in poverty is immense. There has been the unemployment figures have skyrocketed in my country. There's joblessness, there's unemployment on the rise, and there are very poor relief measures. With the other thing that has happened, which is a great concern of mine, because I'm going to talk about, and I plead that unless we have democracy reinstated in our countries, there's going to be no human rights. The government of India has steadily corroded into the federal system, into the decentralization, and it has gone into a mode where, whether you begin with Kashmir, where they used Articles 370 and 35A to make Kashmir a union territory from a state. Also the state of Ladakh has been made into a union territory. In Madhya Pradesh, they use a lockdown to have a political fallout. They have impinged on the independence of Delhi. The city of Delhi is a state government. They have impinged on post-electoral situations in the state of West Bengal. In Lakshadweep, a little island in southwestern India, which is full of Muslims, is a majority Muslim population island. There has been now a diktat that you cannot have beef, that you have to restrict so many things. The whole island is in uproar. And if you speak for Lakshadweep, then of course you are persona non grata. So India, quickly,
need to ask you to wrap up, please, in a minute.
For example, all the commissions have been undermined, including the National Human Rights Commission has been undermined, and the parliament has been undermined. So parliament sessions have not been held. So how do you fight for democracy when you have Unlawful Activities Prevention Act zooming on you, when you can be imprisoned up to 6 months before we are charged? You have cases where you, like the CAA, which makes you a non-citizen if you're a Muslim. And what next? I think next is that we have to strengthen democracy. I have lots of points, but since there's no time, I'll quickly summarize by saying that for democracy to survive, we have to struggle, and we have to therefore interpret HT human rights defenders as democracy defenders. If we do not define human rights defenders as democracy defenders, we will be fighting a small battle. We'll win many battles, but we'll lose the war. To win the war, we have to include the perception of democracy. We have to ensure that there's participation, public debate, consultation. We have to ensure that all the rights are protected. And I have some recommendations, which I shall then later on tell you. I think this is not the place for the recommendations. When you ask me for my recommendations, I'll tell you what we have in mind for the recommendations. I've consulted with 3 or 4 human rights organizations in my country, and we jointly have a proposal. Sorry for taking up a little more time, but thank you very much, Shamini.
Thank you very much, Aruna. We will come back to all the panelists later and ask everyone to give a 1-minute wrap up. So please do share your recommendations at that stage. For now, we'll move on to Aung Myo Min, our final panelist for this session. Myo Min is a prominent human rights advocate. He's the Union Minister for Human Rights in the cabinet of the National Unity Government in Myanmar. Myo Min joined the 1988 democracy uprising and left Myanmar after the military coup. He has lived in exile for 23 years and has continued working on Myanmar human rights issues, particularly involving marginalized people. He graduated from a master program at Columbia University, New York in 1993, where he read human rights. He has won several awards for his work, including the Schuman Human Rights Award in 2017. My question to you, Myo Min, the situation in Myanmar, we know that many defenders and protesters have been harassed, abducted, even killed by the junta. What concrete efforts do you think can be taken by the international community to assist defenders on the ground and stop the violence? Talk to us a little bit about the steps that need to be taken to address the root cause of what is happening in Myanmar so that we can build better together. Thank you very much. Over to you, Myo Min.
Thank you, Shamini. I've attended the Asia Human Rights Defenders Forum several times as an activist, but this is the first time I was invited as the Minister of Human Rights of the National Unity Government. So I was a bit, I'm honored, but I want to tell you that that position is just a matter of title. My heart, my passion as a human rights activist or human rights defender is always with me. Even though I'm wearing 2 hats, the hat of the minister, but my heart is as a human rights defender like before. So I'm very glad to get the chance to talk about that situation in here. So I was listening to the Madam Special Rapporteur and other colleagues from other countries. So the situation of human rights defenders is getting, getting worse and worse in everywhere, including Myanmar. The general situation since the military coup, there's a lot of extrajudicial killing, arbitrary arrest, and violence against the civilian people, and also especially the ethnic people who are hiding in the jungle because they have to leave the country and hiding in the jungle. So this is the general situations. So far, the number of the people who were killed by the military junta is 862 people. Is what killed since February 1st when military staged a coup. And then there's about over 6,000 people are being detained for their human rights activists, for example, for freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and freedom of peaceful demonstration on the street. Their crime is just fighting the human rights being violated and restricted in every part of the country. So many people, especially young people, continue their work for restoring human rights and democracy back to the country, even though there's a lot of restrictions. The spirit of human rights defenders and the young people, especially the desire to see the country free from military dictatorship is quite strong. I was so amazed to see, even though there's a lot of arrests daily, violence, against everywhere, people, every day on the street, and a call for democracy and showing the world that, the struggle for human rights and democracy is still going on in the country. So I would like to say that, that this is the crisis of human rights violations everywhere in the country. Nobody feels safe, and nobody feels, safe everywhere, every part of the country, because that is the systems. The military is using their power and also all their, mechanisms of suppressing the people, but particularly threatening to the human rights defenders, because human rights defenders forefront, for call for, justice, equality, and stop violence. And also, they are also working for the protection and promotion of the right of every people in the country. So they are very targeted. Many human rights defenders are, put under detention because, of their political activities or they're defending their rights. And also, many of them are on the warrant list because, the military have every day they have the list of arrests or the list of warrant, particularly people who has a long history of human rights defenders. So this is the situation. So your question is very right. What the international can do for this situation. Like, that everything is almost collapsed. There's no judicial system available here. So we cannot report to the police. The police and military are the one who are committing everyday human rights violation against the people. And then there's so many laws, the laws could arrest anyone, arbitrary arrest. And the military tribune is somewhere in many of the areas. So we have no right to defend even and practice our legal rights. So this is collapse. But we never feel that we are failed. Because we have a passion in our heart that we will win. We must win. So I really want the human rights defenders or any international communities is to speak out for the people of Myanmar, speaking out for the people who are arrested, speaking out for the people who are in detention, speaking out for the human rights defenders who are practicing their rights to protect the others. So using the kind of, solidarity can really help and show the encouragement and ground a strong solidarity with the people inside the countries. We may be different in country, language, religion, but we are all the family of human beings and humanity heart. So really use your liberty to speak out for the people, particularly your fellow human rights defenders inside the country. So your solidarity is very, very much needed. And not only speak out, also amplify your voices. Because, as a human rights defenders and the people who are from media background, people from the social movement background, you have an amplifier. You can make our voice louder. What I mean is engage with your local communities, telling them what is happening inside the country of Myanmar. So that kind of public awareness, using your communication skills and using your engagement like this, it really good for the people to understand, the struggle inside the country is not finished yet. And also the stakeholders or the government, like from the parliament or from the government or member of parliament or senators, who can highlight the situation of the Myanmar is not only the internal affairs. This is the threat of the regional, regional security and also the international affairs that everyone has a responsible to stop it. So this kind of your lobby job or advocacy with your senators, your government to stop human rights violation and to stop the military regime inside the country is very much appreciated. And also we have, even though we are from Asia, Myanmar belongs to ASEAN. So we have ASEAN Solidarity here, and ASEAN try to play a kind of role to solve the problem as much as they could. There's a lot of debate on that, but the solidarity among the ASEAN people was quite strong. and really need to work on the solidarity of the people in within the ASEAN, also with other Asian country, to lobby our government. The Myanmar situation is no longer only the internal affairs, because it's now spill over to the other neighboring countries like Thailand and India. There's a refugees and there's a kind of migrants and the COVID situation. So I think bear in mind that that Myanmar issue is also threat to the regional and international things like that. So that's why we are closely working for the international advocacy. And then what we like to call is we don't want any more statement without action. There's a lot of statements is enough, but we need a statement with political commitment and concrete action. So every country can take up more stronger concrete actions to move the country from military to democracy, and then bring the country back to the normal situation, rule of law, and back to the civilian government. So this is what we like to call for that. And root causes, your second question is really a bit, very, very difficult to answer, because so many root causes to make things happen. The first thing is that one of the big major challenge for us is the role of military, that allowed in the history of Myanmar. Military regarded as, they are the special VIV, very, very, important person and elite group in the society of the country. So then they said they are the higher the government, they have more power, all the power sources they grabbed, for their power. So that kind of mindset is very dangerous. So that the constitution, drafted in last of the previous constitution, allow the military to have a more supreme power than the government. And also militaries are also getting all kinds of power, like legislative power, and also financial power, weapon powers. So the military is the hub of all the power. That system makes the country more suffer, because military think they are the superior or supreme body of the country. They want to intervene it every time they don't like any move by the government. So that kind of that military supreme mentality is the root causes. So we never let that kind of military mentality and supreme powers again in the future of Myanmar. So that when we talk about that and thinking about the future, how can we prevent military intervention and military having special power in the process of democratization? And how can we ensure the constitution of the federal future, federal democratic constitution allow the more power to the government than the military. So this is the second thing. And also, we should learn another root cause is the previous countries never learned from a lesson, the mistakes, because many of the human rights issues are being ignored or being neglected. In the previous government always say that total denial, we have no human rights violation like this, and they ignore it rather than solving the problem. So many of the root causes are never been solved, never been put on the surface, never been find a way of solve the problem. Or the root cause of the problems are always hiding somewhere. So instead of finding the root causes or finding a way of solving the problem, this is the like a explosive that could explode anytime. So I think we should learn it. Some of the root causes and some of the problems of the human rights violation, particularly the long-time history of marginalization or violence against particular groups, and our attitude toward the ethnic people by the central government should be solve it and find out how can we work together instead of denying this kind of issues and put them aside. So this is the second root causes and really need to fix it. And then the general public altitude toward the particular groups. You know, that we have many diverse ethnic groups in the countries. We have many nationalities, but the public sometimes, you know, because of the propaganda and because of the misinformation and disinformation by the military, the people have a very negative altitude towards other people who are different in terms of religion, in terms of ethnic, or in terms of background. So because of that, that pushed the, you know, more conflict of the countries and also more violence against each other. So I think changing the mindset of the public and also giving the right information and right human rights education is also important for us to solve any kinds of further violence based on the differences, based on the diversities. So these are the things. So any impunity, because the country is a long history of culture of impunity, you know, inside the countries. No one is taking legal action when they committed human rights violations. So the culture of impunity is always encourage the perpetrators to commit more human rights violations, and that feel powerless to the victims or survival because they have nowhere to go for justice. So that any impunity is one of the issue that you really need to work on that. So granting the ending of impunities and granting of the equal access to justice is a must to solve the root causes of culture of impunity. So I think these are the short points I like to highlight it. And also, you know, glad, you know, we are here again to find a way how the international, you know, solidarity and concrete effort would help to liberate Myanmar from the military and showing solidarity. And the root causes are very important when we consider what the strategic action we should use it for solving the problem of the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Myomin, and there were some really solid ideas to carry on how CSOs can actually support and further support the work that is being done in Myanmar at the moment. I would like to firstly thank the panelists. Maria has needed to leave us because she has another commitment, but we still have Aruna and Myomin who are still here, and I'd like to at this stage invite Mary to come back to the fore to offer some reflections based on the panelists' sharings earlier. Over to you, Mary.
Well, it has been a very rich discussion, and I don't think that I'm going to be able to sum it up and to offer a good reflection. So afterwards, I hope when I get the notes, I'll be better able. But first of all, I'd like to say that I agree with everything that Maria said, and about behavior manipulation by social media companies treating us, you know, like that we've all become Pavlovian dogs in many ways, and the lies laced with anger, you know, and what shocks me is the amount of money and time and effort that governments are using in technology, not only to shut down civil society space and have like organizations like Facebook who allow this rampant smearing of human rights defenders, and specifically I'd like to mention women human rights defenders here, without properly tackling you know, the issue through transparency, through regulation, as Maria said, through taking down the post, through having somebody in country, wherever the country is, who knows the context of the country, who can act effectively. I think that's very important. And I learned the other day on a webinar that 75 governments have ordered spyware, 75 around the world. which really was more than I thought. But in the last, I can't remember how many years, I think they said 5 years, 75 countries have ordered spyware. So social media is, but on the other hand, you see, social media can be so good. I always remember the first time somebody disappeared in Zimbabwe, a woman human rights defender, and it was the old days when I was in Amnesty, you know, and social media had just started, Facebook had just started up. And in the old days, you'd be ringing the lawyers trying to find information, and they didn't want to be hearing from all these NGOs because they were too busy trying to do their job. And they set up a Facebook page, and they just put everything on the Facebook page about this disappeared woman, which was fantastic for, I was with Amnesty at the time, fantastic for an organization like Amnesty at the time, because we could just do the work by looking at the Facebook page. So there are pluses and minuses, but I do think at the moment for human rights defenders and other groups too, the minuses are really to the fore. India, of course, is I mean, between the first information report and the unlawful activities prevention legislation and the targeting of human rights defenders who work against the Citizenship Act, and then the targeting of defenders who work for different parts of society, Indian society, different religions, different castes, different minorities. That's ongoing, and it certainly has. India's assault on human rights has definitely, from what I have heard over the last year and seen, has definitely intensified. And as was so clearly articulated by Aruna, and COVID, of course, has just been so tragic for India. And and it's not just India, COVID all over the world has thrown up different kinds of human rights defenders, people who are, for example, health workers, doctors, nurses who are documenting or who have reported on mismanagement of resources or lack of resources by governments, and journalists, of course, who report. And then women who have turned to humanitarian work and giving supplies are being targeted because of that. And then with Myanmar, I mean, it's such a tragic situation. And one of the difficulties I find at the moment is that when I speak to human rights defenders from Myanmar, many of them do not want to be named in any way because of the security risk. But on the other hand, they want reporting on the situation. So it's difficult for me to know what is possible and allowable. So that's why we look for consent. But I mean, I can't take up cases without consent. But, you know, a general statement, as you said, is not going to add much to what's already been reported, except to keep up the media attention. I do think that governments will always be driven by their political and strategic interests. There's no such thing as a good government, and the clinging to power is very much, I think, a root cause of all this injustice by governments. And but, you know, the thing is, I started in the 70s, and governments rise and fall, democracies come and go. And like in the 70s, for example, there were Tibetan human rights defenders going out in the street with photocopies of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You know, in the Czech Republic, the Charter 77 that brought an end to the authoritarian regime there was just photocopies, signatures of the principles that the people wanted. And all over, all of Latin America was in the hands of the military. So I don't think you can ever lose hope. because at the end of the day, there are more and more people working in human rights now, more and more people getting involved. There's a huge job to educate society and stop all this populism. But I certainly think that the situation is not without hope because the people are ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Okay, so we do have a few questions that have come in for both Mary and Myo-min, and then I have a question for Aruna as well, if Aruna, you're still there. So perhaps I can pose my first question actually to Mary, since you also touched about this earlier in your keynote and inferred it here. So the first question is from Christina Palabe from Karapatan in the Philippines. The question is, have you received official invitations so far for visits in any country in Asia? What are your observations so far on the reception of states on your first reports? Two-prong.
Well, hello, Tine, and how are you? I have had no official invitations from anyone. That is, I don't know whether it's a strategy or whether it's COVID or what, and it's still up in the air to play for. But it is also a reason I decided not to do country visits online, because I thought that if states saw a rapporteur doing country visits online, they might say, oh, well, you don't need to go in person. So although I was asked by some NGOs to do country visits online, I decided against it for that reason. Funnily enough, I couldn't believe it. The report was accepted without much pushback at all, even from states I would have considered to be very hostile. And I think it was a lesson for me. I think it was because it was all based on fact. And, when you're able to show the evidence and the statistics, it's very hard for them to come back and say, that's not true. Of course, you had a few states, querying or saying, that they weren't responsible or something like that. But overall, I was actually, I was expecting to have a tough session with states, but in fact, I didn't. And most of them, even some of the hostile ones, said they wanted to work with the rapporteur. So I don't know whether that was just saying it, but they certainly didn't dish me. Now, the next report at Aung, believe me, that will be, I reckon I will be attacked a lot at the General Assembly on long-term detention report, because a lot of it is also in the context of counter-terrorism. A lot of the charges are security related, of people who are held in very long-term detention. And as we know, the UN hasn't wrapped itself in glory over its approach and its acceptance of the counter-terrorism agenda. And it is the 20th anniversary of 9/11 as well. So I would be expecting pushback there. But yeah, so no, I've received no country invitations, as I said, for Asia, and also I think the report went down fine.
Thank you, Mary, and Tinai, I hope that answers your question. Myo-min, coming to you, we've had a few questions on chat for you. I'll put them together for your response. The question is around the Rohingyas and whether they will ever get citizenship in Myanmar, and also what should be the steps taken to strengthen Rohingya human rights defenders. And then we also have, the situation of Myanmar itself, and what the NUG can do to address the situation, to move Myanmar forward towards democracy, really. And finally, we've also had attacks against Rohingya human rights defenders, going back to that question, and also, how would the NUG and yourself as minister, look at and tackle these issues? Thank you. Over to you, Myomin.
Thank you. Since all the questions are interrelated, I want to answer, all together, and let me know if I miss something when I answer the questions. So, the My Minister logo is equality, peace, and justice. This clearly shows what we are planning to do. Equality is no one left behind, and everyone is equally treated and equally protected. No non-discrimination. And second one, peace, because we really want to see the peaceful society where everyone have a mutual respect and also, understanding each other and right to be different. And that one is justice. So justice is very important. So make people, the government accountable or military accountable. So everyone has the equal chance for justice. So that's what we are doing right now. And so let me start with what our minister is doing. We have three priorities. One is the collecting information of the human rights violations of the people by the military, particularly after the military coup. But you know that I have a long history of human rights activists before. So we also have the huge fines and evidence of human rights violations for decades. So this is one of the issues, because like you mentioned that there's no facts, there's no truth. So that is very important for us, collecting all the facts and showing that this is the truth, what happened and what are the human rights violations taking place. And then we will lead that information to the accountability, justice issues. So all the information of human rights violations are well documented and used for the international judicial system for justice of all. That I mean not only the government bilateral action for justice or taking action against the military junta, but we also want to use the criminal procedures or justice procedure, something like ICC. So make that all the human rights violations are well recorded, and justice is prevailed for the perpetrators. So I mean not only the Rohingya people, but anyone who who experience of human rights violation, particularly three crimes: crime against humanity, war crime, and what is another one? War crime and crime against humanity and genocide. So these cases will be taken to the international judicial systems to bring the justice accountable. And that one is make sure that the government policies are in line with the international standard of human rights. So any policies, any positions must be reflected international standard. So this is what I'm currently working on that. So we received thousands, many human rights violation cases, especially from the human rights defenders and also ethnic people, also some cases from Rohingya people. So we are collecting that one, and we are sending this information and using this kind of human rights violation, utilizing human rights mechanism. The Myanmar human rights section, UPR session is coming very soon. So we have updated information about the cases, and also we send a direct communication and channel to the UN Special Rapporteur of Myanmar and other Special Rapporteur. So that is what we are doing right now, using the coming human rights section programs, human rights council programs for bringing attention and justice for the people. And for the recent one, that the Rohingya issue, our NUG government released our position on Rohingya issue. 1 week ago, maybe you're not aware of that, but it's clearly said that we no longer tolerate any discrimination based on anything, and we start using the Rohingya is the terminology of the government official usage, because we respect the identity right of the people, and then we call Rohingya as the way they want to be called. Second one, we guarantee that the individual rights of the people in the country without any social background, basis of the background, language and thing. So everyone is protected by law. And also, we were bringing equal protection for everyone in the countries. So Rohingyas are also included. That one is regarding the citizenship law. We found that citizenship law of 1982 is discriminatory. Not only the Rohingya people, but also other untitled ethnic groups of the country. Because of that, there's a lot of discrimination and corruption, power abuses. So we clearly declare that we will review the 1982 law. We will think about for repeal the law, because these are the root causes of discrimination. What we guarantee is everyone citizenship will be decided by birth, not by the race. So anyone born in Myanmar from the citizenship of Myanmar are entitled to enjoy the citizenship. And we no longer use the special classification of citizenship, because in 1982, in the previous one, we have a full citizen, and a half citizens, or three types of citizens. That make lots of discrimination and also power abuse. So we no longer use that kind of national verification forms. And also we are the Kofi Annan Commission recommendation are the starting point to consider what are the future and further process of bringing justice and bringing peace, especially in the people of Rakhine and other part of the country. So we will use this recommendation, and depending on the context of current situation, we will follow up to implement it. And then the last one is the return of the Rohingya people who are in Bangladesh. So we guarantee that we promise that we will be in cooperating with the other countries for safe, volunteer, and dignified return when time is appropriate. We cannot say when it was, but we really need to make, we are already in our commitment and for the consideration about that. And then we welcome the Rohingya people to join the movement, and also some of the government position, government kind of committees or commissions in the future. We appreciate that Rohingya people, even from the refugee camp, show their solidarity for the Spring Revolution. So we always see that they are the part of the society. They are not a problem of society. So we always welcome our hands for them to participate in the future process of democratization and utilize their expertise. They are also love for the country. So these are the issues, 3 questions. My response to the 3 questions, which is related to Rohingya and the work of the NUG government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Myo Min. I've just been informed that Mary has a prior commitment and will need to leave us. I would like to take the opportunity to basically thank you so much for spending the last hour and a half with us, plus. And I think we've learned a lot from your keynote, and it's really great to hear that there's been some progress, in some of the recommendations that Forum Asia made at the last Asian Human Rights Defenders Forum, and it's a pleasure to be working with you in your role with this mandate. And we hope that together with you, we'll be able to really work for the promotion and protection of human rights, and especially those who work really hard to protect human rights in the communities where they are the human rights defenders. And thank you so much, Mary. If there's anything that you'd like to say before we continue with our Q&A.
Well, Shamini, it's been a great pleasure. I have great, as you know, respect for Forum Asia. and you were one of the first organizations I contacted after I became mandate holder. So I really do want to continue working with you. I encourage people to really put stuff in the Defenders inbox if there are complaints about individual human rights defenders who have been targeted or attacked, or even groups of defenders. Depending on the capacity I have at the time, then of course I'll take up the cases, and I'll continue to try and raise awareness about who human rights defenders are and the legitimate and peaceful work they do. And I listened with great intent to Mo and Aruna, and you know, these are countries, and the Philippines I've talked to, these are countries I have been in touch with lots of defenders in those countries. So this is, I suppose it's increasing my understanding. So thank you very much. And goodbye.
Thank you. And distinguished guests, we'll go back to our question and answer session. There's a question, Aruna, if I may pose you a question. You mentioned something earlier in your sharing. You talked about, you know, how you've been in activism for the last 50 years, but only in the last 10, you've seen the need to stress that the right to information is a human right, along with other basic human rights. So I was curious to learn from you when you started noticing that you needed to do this, and maybe the causation factors, if you're able to ascribe any to this. Thank you.
Well, I'm very sorry if I gave the impression that it's only the last 10 years. Right to Information is a 25-year-old campaign. It began with poor people asking for their share of minimum wages and asking for their right to know and see the records kept by the government. And that's how the Right to Information began. That was 25 years ago. The law itself now is, since 2015, is 16 years old. So it's not a 10-year campaign. In the last 10 years, there's been suppression of human rights by the state. So that was a different issue. I really actually meant that this last 10 years have been very bad for human rights, for all kinds of rights, for social activism, for public protest. For all of that, these last 10 years have been bad. I didn't mean that I've only worked for Right to Information for the last 10 years. I'm sorry if I gave that impression. So I have worked for the last 50 years, basically with people who are economically deprived. And poverty is the biggest crime against humanity. Let me tell you this, that there are millions of people who don't know where to get their daily meat from, when they don't know where they'll get their next meal from. They don't know where to buy their medicines. They are dying like ninepins. So we have argued actually with human rights organizations in India that poverty and poverty-related issues are human rights issues, because it's not human rights where you go and target an individual to attack that particular individual, but you're making policy that attacks hundreds and thousands of people. So a state which makes an anti-poor policy is actually an institution that works against human rights. If you look at it like that, because what really constitutes poverty is the deprivation of food, of medicine, of health, of basic necessities, of housing. So my life has been spent with that. And if I've come to human rights, it's through my concern with poverty, and they face human rights violations every single day. And no human rights organization comes to their help. They're beaten because they belong to the wrong caste. They're beaten because they are the wrong class. They're beaten because they are women. They're beaten because they are minorities. And it's a daily occurrence. So for them, human rights is not an issue which happens at a particular time with a particular issue. It's a day-to-day occurrence. So for me, my definition of human rights has many layers. One layer is what we've talked about today, but there are other layers in which humanity is denied to people, and that's a denial of human rights. When you're not even seen as a human being, and you're asked to produce, or you're used as a burden of just to use your body as a receptacle of labor for carrying, for weighing. When you're beaten, when you're old, you're still wearing your body thin by working. When you're denied, you have no insurance, you have no pension, you have no rations, then it's a violation of human rights for me. So I wasn't going to say all this because I know you were looking at a very small slice. But for me, I've been involved with human rights, but it's our larger definition of what human rights actually means for people who are on the other side of the economic divide. Since you've given me this, and I'd like to conclude with just what I could not say when I was talking, because as it is, there were so many issues which are of common concern, and even within the slice of India's relationship with what we can define as sophisticated human rights, there were so many other issues which I couldn't cover. But nevertheless, the incarceration of so many Indians who have been speakers and amplifiers of voices are in jail. And every day there is a threat and that fear that you will be put in jail because you're amplifying the voice of the poor, specifically amplifying the voice. Major lot of people who've gone in are people who have amplified the voice of injustice. And that injustice can also be the injustice of poverty. And so many of people are in jail, beginning with Vinayak Sen, who was jailed many years ago, and the Bhima Koregaon whole 5 or 6 people who were called Maoists in jail because they spoke up for the poor, spoke up for a lot of people I just defined as living without basic human rights. One recommendation, which is that the regional platform of national human rights institutions, in the case of Asia, the Asia Pacific Forum of NHRIs, APF, must initiate steps for further engagements with civil society. So that people like us who come and call ourselves not only human rights activists, but call ourselves social activists, have the opportunity to engage with people who are only dealing with human rights, so that we can bring to bear the larger issues which people in social activism and fighting for social rights also face. So should human rights actually expand to cover those rights, and we feel they should. They should cover all RTI activists who have been killed. So every RTI activist is a human rights defender. Actually, they ask for information not for for themselves, but for a large chunk of humanity, and they are killed. So are they not human rights defenders? Are people not people who ask and talk about poverty against the inhumanity of social policy or economic policy that targets the poor? Are they not human rights defenders? Are they not? So this is a question I wanted to bring to your meeting. I hope that we can have many more debates on this. And I would like to thank AINNI in India for raising this issue, and the People's Union for Civil Liberties, to which I belong, which also has raised many issues. So this is a coming together of all the human rights organizations which look at specificities, and those campaigns and movements will look at the larger reality of the intersectionality between democracy and human rights, in which the rights are economic and social and political rights as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aruna. Let me at this juncture, invite Myo Min. You have one more question on the chat box, which I'll post to you, and then if you can use that as your wrap up, that would be fantastic. The question to you here is: what is your observation and comment on the genocide committed against the Rohingya population by the Myanmar military and Buddhist extremists, and the ongoing investigations carried out by the ICC and ICJ? Question coming from Sazad, Bangladesh. Please go ahead, Myo Min, and use that opportunity also for your 1 minute wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that part in our National Unity Government position paper. So that, we call for the accountability of the human rights violations in last decades. So this includes all people in the country, including Rohingya people, or even, other non-Rohingya people, because we are calling the accountability of everyone, because this kind of violations are taking place everywhere in the country. We have a long history of, that kind of the violations and violence against the other ethnic people, violence against women, violence against children, you name it, we have it. So I think this is the clearly mentioned in our position paper of accountability and justice for all. So in order to do that, we we are in the process of finding the way of ratification of the Rome Statute, because this is the way the government also is responsible and accountable to make accountability of the perpetrators. So we are finding the way of ratification of the Rome Statute, and all the cases by the criminals will be put on their court as a crime against humanity, war crime, and then genocide cases. So this is what we're planning. So that covers every crimes against anyone in the country. For the ICJ cases, the NUG government sent a third report as required by the government. So we recently report the cases. So we just simply reported what we have done regarding the son of the how can we say that the recommendation made by the court. So this is just an update. So the justice will be served, and also the decision will be made by the court and judge. So we are ready to listen to the observation, finding, and so we are following and in due respect of the court. So this is what we can do it in this situation. And my last comment, but thank you so much for that. And also the Burmese people are very brave to continue even though there's a lot of struggles, because they believe in the principle of human rights and they know they are the genuine human rights defenders. So what we need is international solidarity. That really need to show your solidarity, and any act that you can support to stop the military junta is well appreciated. That's all my clear message to everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Myomin. And I think that we've heard very rich discussions, as Mary has said, from all the panelists together with Mary as well. We're not tackling really simple issues. We are tackling really complex, multi-layered issues that have very strong histories in our respective countries that we're talking about today. So I'd like to thank firstly the panelists for taking the time to unpack some of these very complex issues with us through the lens of protection of human rights defenders. So I thank you for sharing your expertise, your hopes, also your recommendations to us as Forum Asia, as civil society, and also to the Special Rapporteur. I'd like to say also thank you to participants who have posed your questions. I'm sorry if there was one or two, I think, that we didn't manage to get through. But thank you very much for posing them. I'm sure the rest of the 3.5 days that we have left for the AHRDF 9 is going to be quite an experience for us. I hope that everything goes well. I wish you a very good forum moving forward. And my thanks finally to Mai for that amazing presentation and the song that really struck a nerve. So thank you for sharing your talents with us. And with that, we've come to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everybody.